introductions, and I will start out with my own bill introduction first. I would request that RS 2673 be introduced. That bill creates an exit mechanism for offenders on the drug offender registry to be able to get off of that registry early if they meet certain requirements. So specific to drug offender registry. Any opposition to that being introduced? Seeing none, we'll have that introduced. Let's see, Scott, did you have a bill to introduce as well?
I did, Mr. Chairman. We have Sentencing Commission, Scott Schultz with the Executive Director with the Sentencing Commission. We do have a RS 2342. This is a Senate Bill 123 Substance Abuse Treatment Bill that would effectively transfer the certification process from the Department of Corrections to the Sentencing Commission. This is one of those things that is kind of a back office administrative type thing, but it's in statute, and we've conferred with Department of Corrections, and they don't have any objection.
Super, thank you. Any objection to that introduction? Seeing none, it'll be introduced. Thank you, Scott. Are there any other bill introductions today from anybody? All right, not seeing any. We will get into the heart of our presentation today. We'll welcome Scott Schultz back up to the microphone, and he'll share with us what for the last year. So, Scott, look forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. On behalf of the Kansas Sentencing Commission, we thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk with you today about a few things. You have my handout, and I'm going to kind of jump over that quite a bit. But I will say that we do have an opportunity here. I know that there's new members on the committee. This is actually my 11th session, so I'm feeling a little aged. But the 11th session, and I know that some of you probably have new interests as far as criminal justice. Maybe public safety brings you here, those type of things. Maybe Representative French's wit. Maybe that's probably or the vice chair's stash. That could be another one of the other things that drew you to this committee. But otherwise, I will say that my experience has been in the time that I have been here, it has been a very active committee and have passed actually quite a few bills next to judiciary, probably passed most of the bills that percentage-wise coming out of this committee. So one of the things that I'd like to do today is kind of explain a little bit, because I know that we're on a little bit different levels of competency when it comes to what the Sentencing Commission is and does, just to go over a little bit of that and talk with you briefly about that. If I can get my, I might have to reboot or something. Is it not forwarding? Okay, very good. I apologize again. So we're going to cover 4 different things today. Just a little bit about sentencing guidelines and the history. Kansas has had sentencing guidelines since 1993, and this is for just felonies. So you know that we have misdemeanors and felonies. The sentencing guidelines only covers felony, but we're going to cover the history of that, review that a little bit. I have passed out some laminates for you. These are the sentencing grids, both the drug and the non-drug grid. They are, if you have small plates, they are a great placemat. If you have a large coffee cup, they're great coasters. So they serve dual purposes. Then we're going to go over an anatomy of the legislative impact, and you're going to be seeing quite a few of these in this committee. You will have a lot of fiscal impacts that you receive to try and make policy decisions on the bills, but what you receive from the Sentencing Commission will be detailed, data-driven items that you can actually use in your policy-making decision. And we're going to go over the parts of those. It seems kind of fundamental, but just go over the parts of what that fiscal impact from our office looks like. I'll then jump a little bit onto the annual report to kind of give you an idea of trends of what we've seen in criminal justice. And then at the end, we'll talk about prison population projections and what we're looking at. We do population projections for the Department of Corrections on an annual basis in the summer, and that gives them a 10-year look at what potentially the population is going to be. So as far as the commission is concerned, I am accountable to a lot of people, including this body, but also our 17-member commission. And those are everyone from Secretary Zamuda, who you heard from yesterday, to judges. We have the cross-section, basically, of the criminal justice community on the commission. Probation officers, lots of attorneys, that's a good and a bad thing. But we even have public members. We have 2 House members and 2 Senate members that serve on the commission, with the goal to essentially be what I usually call gatekeepers of the guidelines. So you can kind of see who's on the list. Representative Barker and our very own Representative Heiberger in this committee is on the commission and has served faithfully for quite some time. So some of those duties that we have include we have an operations side for our program, and then we have the Senate Bill 123 program. And so pretty simple. Our operations program does a lot of research. I have a director of research, research analysts, data entry folks, that every single felony that's committed in the state fills out a form that the commission actually has promulgated. And that form then is used at the clerk level in your counties to essentially demonstrate what happened on that sentencing on that particular day for that felony, whether it be a multi-count case or not. Those are actually then sent to our office, where we actually take the data from that and put it into our database. We also have the benefit of utilizing KDOC databases as well as KBI databases. So we have a lot of data that we're able to utilize, and from that, then we're able to provide certain things like those prison projections that I discussed, like these bed space impacts that you're going to see this session from the database that we actually have. So I want to encourage you to, if you have questions about how many of this, or what about this, or something of that nature, to call on us. Our business is bringing value to you and to the rest of our stakeholders, so that if you need that information, I can't guarantee that we're going to have that information all the time and in every instance, but a lot of the cases, I can tell you, if you're concerned about drug possession, or you're concerned about these other things, that we probably have a data point for you to be able to look at. And the data is really good going back quite a ways too. So you'll start seeing some of those trends in the annual report that I talk about, but that kind of gives you a flavor for some of the things. We are the State Statistical Analysis Center for the state of Kansas, and that allows us then to gather that data to be able to assimilate it and bring it to you. Part of one of my main priorities that I have is to educate our stakeholders as well. This is part of that, but we also have a special projects director that also brings information to attorneys, to probation officers, other stakeholders involved in the process. We did multiple webinars reaching hundreds of individuals this last year for that very purpose. Thankfully, she's previously my staff attorney, so she has legal background as well to be able to assist those stakeholders when they're looking at complex issues that are sentencing issues. We also have what's called a desk reference manual. It's a thick, it's kind of the criminal justice practitioner's Bible that is updated every year. You should be getting a copy of that. Certainly, we know that your time is valuable and the likelihood of you memorizing all of that is remote at best. But at the same time, it is a reference document, and to at least know that this is what practitioners are using in the field, and as well as those grids that you have been handed to. I've talked about the prison bed population a little bit in the annual report, and those are statutory duties. We have almost 27 different statutory duties that we have. So the research side is what I talked about a little bit. This is something that we have master's and PhD level folks that crunch all the numbers for us. We then have another side, the Senate Bill 123. And this was passed in 2003. It's a substance abuse treatment program that we administer. And this is if I'm convicted of possession of drugs and I fall into a certain criteria by statute, I can receive state-paid treatment. And it's done by treatment providers, substance abuse treatment providers in your communities. They're certified through the Department of Corrections, and then we actually kind of act as the bank to administer pass-through funds to the tune of about, depends on the year, but $8 to $10 million. So these folks are actually getting state-paid substance abuse treatment in this particular program. And it has been very successful since the time that it began, as I said, in 2003. We also have universities that will reach out to us as far as private research requests. We do that a lot, and that is one of those things that, again, our data is so good, and I'm proud of that. I'm biased, but I'm proud of that fact that we have the data that goes back, and they're always asking for it, and so we actually charge for that. That's one of our only revenue-generating sources, other than that desk reference manual that you see before you, and that's part of the situation. Otherwise, we're almost 99% SGF funded. So just FYI, SGF. In doing that, then that's one of our only revenue-generating things that we actually will do with private research folks, and so we allow them to have some of that aggregate data, so then they can actually work on usually university-related type of things. We also have I have a part-time staff attorney that is, that for the most part, most of what he does is help stakeholders with a Q&A helpline. And we have folks call or email him, and he will actually discuss with them sentencing issues. There are always probation officers filling out pre-sentence investigation reports that require potential issues. We have special sentencing rules that are, again, complex, and in some cases, depending on the combinations, they're needing assistance. Attorneys, judges reach out to us to try and do that, and so we serve as a resource as best we can to actually be that helpline or that lifeline for them when they're looking for that. Compared to your speaker yesterday, we are a fairly small office. A very small office. But at the same time, we are freestanding in nature, and that allows us to be objective. I'm not beholden to Secretary Zamuda, not beholden to the KBI. again, we talked about accountability. I'm accountable to them certainly, but we are not, the data is what the data is. And so that allows us to be able to provide that information to you in a way that the Attorney General or anyone else is not nudging us in a certain direction. So I've discussed a little bit the legislative issues that you're most interested in, most likely, happen to be those bed space impacts that we talked about. There are sometimes there'll be special requests that come up too, and keep in mind, sometimes you might have an idea for a bill or something like that. We will do pre-filing type of impact requests too. So keep that in mind, that if you're thinking of something, and it doesn't, potentially, it's not going to be a huge impact, you're probably going to be better off than having a bill that's going to cost 500 beds or something of that nature. But at least to know that going in before you file it, that gives you an opportunity to make that decision one way or the other. So keep that in mind. Just a little bit of history about how we came to be. Some of you that are a little bit older can remember a time when we had indeterminate sentencing. You'd hear on the radio a lot of the time, so-and-so got 5 to 15 years in the state penitentiary, or 15 to life, or something of that nature. In 1993, that changed. There were issues as far as prison overcrowding litigation that occurred in 1988. There was a recommendation to establish a sentencing commission, and that was established by the legislature. And then subsequent to that, the sentencing commission tried to determine whether or not guidelines were actually a great idea. And what I mean by guidelines is specifically what you see before you as far as that laminate sheet, that based upon your criminal history and the severity of the crime is what you potentially receive. And what the commission actually found was that they found disparities based upon race and geography. And so those folks that were in more rural areas, there was some more racial disparity than they would see in the metro areas. And similarly, geographically, burglaries, for example, in Gove County, which there hardly any crime. Burglaries in Gove crime took on a much greater penalty per se in an indeterminate world than they would be, say, in Johnson County or Wyandotte County. I was a former prosecutor for a number of years, and I can tell you that you have a burglary, afternoon docket, and that burglary, you have 15 burglaries stacked up on your desk, and that's what you do in the afternoon. Well, that's, you start getting desensitized to those type of things because burglaries are burglaries. In smaller communities, a burglary is a pretty big deal. And that is, when you're talking about neighbors knowing neighbors and those type of things, those were there were disparate treatment of those individuals. So part of that, the commission started looking at that proportionality as to the crimes themselves, and then truth in sentencing, because a lot of times 15 years in prison, a sentence essentially meant half of that plus, I think, a year and a half or something like that. So it really wasn't a truth in sentence type of setting. So after the commission was created, they finally set out to have legislation that recommending that the sentencing guidelines be passed, and that's what happened in 1993. Part of that, again, the guidelines are set up to on the assumptions that incarceration is reserved for the most serious offenders, and that at that time, the primary purpose of prison was for incapacitation and punishment. We've evolved from that point to know that around 98% of individuals going into prison are going to come out at some point in time. So we have moved that needle to there's a rehabilitation piece that has moved in. And so DOC actually has a robust reentry program that they do to try and get folks ready to go back out into the community. The fun fact, it may not seem like it, but the average individual spends about 2 years in prison. That's it. You don't have a lot of people spending years and years. Those that do obviously spend a lot of time because we have mandatory minimums based upon some of those crimes that they could land them anywhere from 15 to 25, depending on what legislation they're actually under. So the guidelines were passed, and I don't even have my own copy. So what you have is a drug grid and a non-drug grid, and this tells us that that based upon your criminal history or the severity of the offense, just how many months, and that's what these numbers are months. These sheets are very prevalent, and you'll see them on counsel table in most of the district courts in our state, and that helps counsel for the state as well as for the defense to be able to remind them of these grid based upon the offense. So drug grids are obviously pretty self-explanatory. Non-drugs pretty much encompass all the rest of those crimes. And so what you have is the legislature has decided years ago that if I am similarly situated with the chair as to a crime that we've been charged with, if my criminal history is greater, I am going to be punished more severely, even though it was the same exact offense on the same exact date in the same exact place. So, so this is what we have there are other states with sentencing guidelines. Those are some where add points. There's certainly other things that they're added to. Ours is a very simple modeled off of Oregon, and it was done to stay simple, to help victims understand what the process, to help defendants understand what they were getting themselves into based upon the charges and their criminal history, and then be able to, the courts as well as the parties, the attorneys involved, to be able to facilitate the system. So this kind of gives you an idea of that severity level 1 is the most serious. And it goes down from there. So on the non-drug grid, for example, level 10 is your least serious crime. The green shaded area is a presumptive probation. So if I fall in the presumptive, in that box, in that location, I am presumptively, it's presumptive probation that I would be sentenced by the court. The white areas are presumptive prison. And so you can kind of tell the difference on both grids where those fall. The blue is what's called a presumptive imprisonment box, or PIB, or we call it a border box. And in that case, the court can go either way. Depending on the circumstances, they can decide whether or not to give the individual probation. And there's no departure, is what we call it. You can, now, if there are certain circumstances that are outside a normal crime, especially in the violent crime context, that allows for departures from the guidelines. And so courts can depart up, they can depart down. What I will tell you is, from a statistical standpoint, most of the departures that actually occur from the grid are downward, and that's usually because the parties have agreed to do that. And if the judge agrees, then they'll actually be able to do that. But the parties have to agree, and the judge has to agree for that actually to happen. Otherwise, you know what you're going to receive as far as a sentence there. Certainly then, if you have multiple counts that you've been convicted of, those can be run concurrently together or consecutively, one after the other. So there's a lot of nuances that occur, and even after I'm going on 28 years now practicing law, there's always something new, that different combinations that come up, and that's a reason why we have a staff attorney available to assist folks out there that are struggling with some of these things. So the presumptive guidelines allow us three main things. They establish that equity as much more possible than the indeterminate sentences. So individuals with that typical case are treated the same, no matter whether they're in Bourbon County or Barton County or Butler County. They also allow for, as I discussed, the departures in atypical cases, those cases that may be more heinous, or there may be some facts there that need to be taken into account. It also, from our perspective, it allows for more certainty in predicting prison populations. And from our perspective here in this committee, that's important for you, because the projections that, and I'll share those with you in just a moment, those projections allow us to be able to forecast as best we can. I always tell people we don't have a crystal ball, but our computer model has been fantastic the last quite a few years. And that's kind of attributed to our research director that actually created it. But it is fantastic in terms of being able to predict what we're looking at as far as prison populations. Why is that, short of patting myself on the back and our agency, why is that important for you? Because certainly if there was an increase in prison population, the Department of Corrections is going to need to know that, because they just can't put up prisons. They need to receive legislative approval, and they need probably about at least 2 or 3 years to get plans together and those type of things. With the forecasting that we do for them, that allows us to be able to give you a heads up, as well as them, that it's coming. That is a situation where we can either save $250,000 by looking at this and understanding the forecasting, or we can go ahead and build and never be able to fill it. Unfortunately, the KJ facility is somewhat of an example of that. We have a huge facility out there, and based upon some reform efforts, certainly have changed that with the juveniles, but it is a huge area with a lot of buildings, and there's not a whole lot of people out there or at least there's not enough, a lot of juveniles out there to fill it. So that's why it's important to be able to again, be good stewards, and that's what this, the population, using the guidelines. By using those guidelines, then we can predict and see how many people are averaging in each of these boxes to be able to then put that into the computer model. So I've kind of touched on some of these other things already in terms of the tracking that we do. Again, having that data is very important, and what you're going to see, again, I'll go back to my experience here with the legislature. There are a lot of anecdotes that fly around the State House, and I think a lot of you probably know that already. You know, so-and-so's neighbor told me this, and so it must be true, and it may be that may be the case. However, in our world, we look at data-driven approaches and try and see where the data is. And so I think in a lot of the cases, you know, we can answer those questions. In some cases, we can't. But we can get you closer in a lot of the cases to not anecdotes, but actually some data to be able to make a better decision when you look at some of these bills. So again, I again second call for encouraging you, if you have questions about things or want to know more information about a certain topic, drugs, etc., please call on us. We have, so we are tracking those on an annual basis, and so this hopefully will be helpful for you on the bills during the session, so that you can at least see if, you know, if a bill is trying to increase penalties for something, you can kind of see where, you know, where that is on the grid based upon, you know, whether it's a drug crime, whether it's a non-drug crime, and see for yourself, you know, when we talk about proportionality, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit, proportionality of crimes. So hopefully that will be helpful for you. As it relates to the legislative bed space impacts, you will be getting impacts on most bills from us. The process normally is the division of the budget will actually make a request from us on the bill, and then we will provide that to them, but then we also provide it to this committee as well as Senate Judiciary, and in many cases, if the bill is applicable, in House Judiciary as well. And that will actually cover what I have on the screen for you as far as the outline of what the impact is going to give you. The box, for the most part, being probably the most important for you. Again, we understand that you are very busy, and reading reams of paper is something that you normally think of when you think about data, and I'm going to give you data. But thankfully, this impact, we went to this system to give you the box. And that essentially allows you then to specifically take a quick look. On the first page, I always know what the impact is going to be as far as what the Sentencing Commission is telling us, how many admissions that this bill looks like we'll have in the first year and the 10th year. What's the impact on the prison beds for this next year and in the 10th year. And from a fiscal note standpoint, again, if there's anything as far as having something on our office, what kind of fiscal impact that may have. Increased number of journal entries that we might receive, or in some cases, there's actually a dollar figure that's placed upon some of these bills. So if there's nothing else that you look at these impact and you're trying to look through things, this is it right here. We know that you guys have bill summaries as well. We put that in the bill so we can keep track of it as well. So that's part of it. The findings, if you want to dig a little bit deeper, the findings are actually there. This is kind of an example in the slide of some of those findings that you would actually see. We will present you with things that we have in our database. We will present you with arrest data that KBI has. Anything that we can possibly get to you for you to make a better decision on the bill. So those are the findings. There's an impact assessment. One of the things we added too, because this was when Representative John Rubin was chair of the committee years ago, he had asked to set, since we had talked about proportionality a lot, he had asked, can you put a proportionality section in this impact so that if I know that a bill is going to increase, what other bills are going to be, what other crimes are, if I bump this thing up, what other crimes can I expect to be looking at as to be proportional with the crimes? And so at the last part or the back of the impact, you will in some of the bills, you'll actually see a proportionality comparison. So will you see, if a bill that's defective muffler, is that the same proportionally as attempted rape? Those type of things, and obviously I'm kidding, but those type of things that gives you an opportunity to not look at things just in a vacuum, just in the committee, just at that particular time, but it allows you to see where does it fit with the rest of the crimes that we have in the statutes. So hopefully that will be helpful to you as well. And then you could make a decision. Is that, should that crime there, as far as failure to register, should it be a level 3? Is that similar to kidnapping, aggravated battery? And so that gives you, again, just a little bit more information that hopefully you can use. Surprisingly, every year we do an annual report. Just a little humor there. But this kind of gives you a trend as to what criminal justice is looking at as far as, again, just felonies are concerned. And so people will ask us, well, what are the top 5 crimes? Well, here are, just to kind of give you an idea of, for those individuals receiving prison, probation, and jail sentences, this is kind of the breakdown of what you see. The hope on these things, when you look through some of these, you'll start seeing some recurring themes. And I can tell you one to start out with is drugs. That will be a recurring theme that you see over and over again. Is that an area that maybe you should be looking at even more closely, since it constitutes almost 4 out of every 10 crimes? for everything. So those are the type of things that may catch your eye during this process as to, well, I keep seeing that drugs are a problem. Maybe we need to be looking at some efforts. Maybe there's some bills that end up looking in that direction. You never know from the commission. We also look at demographic information. People are a lot of times interested about race and gender distribution, and this is one of the things you can see here in this particular slide. We do keep track of ethnicity and or race and gender in terms of right now, what you normally see in the context of prison population, for example. Normally, 90 to 92% of those committing those felonies are men. The rest are females. And that obviously kind of goes into why we only have one female prison to house those folks, and the rest are all for male. So, but this kind of just gives you an idea as far as you can see, depending on what census statistics and things that you look at, our state population for African American population is somewhere between 6 and 8%. Well, certainly that's disproportionate as far as what we have as far as sentencing. That's quite a bit higher with the black population. We look at ethnicity and age distribution as well. As you can kind of tell, as far as the age of the offenders, the older they get, they start aging out. They start apparently maturing, and this is pretty common, not just in Kansas, but throughout other jurisdictions, that the older you get, less likely you are to be committing offenses. One of the things that DOC struggles with sometimes, obviously, is having those geriatric individuals that have been in prison for many, many years, and what to do with those folks. The problem with it is normally the reason why they're in for so long is because of the seriousness of the offenses. And so there's a balancing act that actually they have to do with trying to take care of an aging population, but also there's a safety aspect there as well that they have to look at. But what you see here, normally, when you have the 21 to 20, even the 30-year-olds, that's normally the range of folks committing crimes. The reason why we bump out to 30, 31 mainly is due to DUIs, felony DUIs. Johnson County leads the way with DUI convictions. A lot of that, for whatever reason, certainly there's cross-state issues. Representative Resman probably has some idea about folks coming from Missouri and that type of thing too. But Johnson County on a regular basis carries the state as far as felony DUIs are concerned. Just a little bit more information for you in terms of the prison sentences. You can kind of see a little bit there, some different. The nice part about the database that we have is we can do a lot of aggregate information, and then we can actually drill down even farther too. If we want to just pick up prison sentences and look at them, we can actually tell you, here's how many admissions. There was COVID has done a number on DOC as far as prison admissions are concerned. Normally, admissions lead releases almost every single year. The last 2 years, that has not been the case. We have had fewer admissions. I'll kind of talk about that a little bit, and you obviously will hear with some other speakers during the time here. They'll have reasons, obviously, for why that is as well. But just keep in mind, we can slice and dice this a lot of different ways, and that's kind of the purpose of this particular slide. We can also look at individually at the probation population. And again, because we have fewer cases that are coming into the system, we actually have a decrease in probation population as well. Do I think that this is going to continue? I think it will for a while, but not for long. As the courts continue to work on their backlogs, I think we're going to continue to see more cases coming into the system. A lot of those things, and I know that DA Mark Bennett can tell you, they have backlogs in their jails. And I think that Vice Chair maybe made that comment yesterday about jails being full. And so those are, many of those, a lot of those are folks that have more serious offenses that are going to be spending more time. And so we have a stacking effect that occurs in the prison system, that they're not getting out in 2 years on average. They're actually going to be staying for quite a bit longer because of their criminal history, because of the severity of the offense. So we have more top 10, top 5 offenses from a probation standpoint. Again, these are only non-drug offenses. That kind of gives you an idea of statewide for individuals that are on probation, what offenses those are actually being committed. And then on the next slide, this is pretty common as far as possession versus your distribution offenses and that type of thing. Folks getting probation, usually it's usually about 8 out of every 10 drug offenses are going to be receiving probation. And keep in mind, this was, it looks like 3,227 probation drug sentences for this particular frequency. One of the things we look at too is, well, I'll talk about that too. The DUIs we talked about just briefly. The statute is set up so that in the DUI context, folks used to serve DUIs in prison. And then the legislature, when we started having overcrowding issues, pulled back, and now only DUIs, felony DUIs can only be served in jail. So this kind of gives you this slide gives you an idea that we've had 389 DUIs, PISs, post-imprisonment sentences, and again, those are served in county jail. We also have, these are what are DUIs, animal cruelty, you'll see some of those cases sometimes, and felony domestic battery. These are not on-grid offenses. These are what are called, we have off-grid offenses, and we have on-grid offenses. We also have non-grid offenses, and this is what the non-grid offenses are. So they have the non-grid offenses are self-contained in the statute. And so DUI, felony domestic battery, and animal cruelty all have the elements of the offense and their punishments within their own statute. And so they're kind of like their own little island, and that's why we call them non-grid. DUIs are normally, the DUI statute is normally amended every single year. That's just the way sometimes it happens, but it seems that way that's what happens. Because it's an important social issue, certainly. Animal cruelty, we don't have too many of those. As you can see, one sentence, 12 sentences. Thank goodness we only had 12 felony domestic batteries in that particular year. Those are things that domestic battery obviously is a misdemeanor, and you actually have to work your way up to felony domestic battery. And so thankfully those are low. And so most of the non-grid offenses are those felony DUIs that are third time or subsequent DUIs. We have, in Kansas, we have our big four counties that we look at. A lot of the times, not simply just because they're the biggest, but because normally the way they go, the rest of the state goes. Normally with Sedgwick, Johnson, Wyandotte, and Shawnee counties, you have about half of your felony crimes that occur there. 1 in every 5 felonies occurs in Sedgwick County. So we have, this is one of the appendixes in our annual report that you can see, but it specifically looks at those 4 counties, runs down what the crimes are for each of those as well, so that we can kind of get a better idea. They're not the same. Wyandotte and Johnson County have different crimes that are in the top 5. Similarly, Sedgwick and Shawnee as well. So, in fact, this past year, Shawnee actually took the number 3rd place as far as most crimes behind Sedgwick and Johnson. So, and Wyandotte fell to 4th. Again, what I can tell you is COVID obviously has dealt quite the dizzying blow from a statistical standpoint, because from a forecasting standpoint, from a data collection standpoint, it's just been difficult all the way around. I discussed the projections themselves. This is something that at the end of the fiscal year, we get data cut from DOC. And we have 6 weeks by statute to turn that around into prison population projections. And what that does is we have meetings with folks to make assumptions as well as look at trends. And I'm going to show you what those are right now as to our prisons. Certainly when it's each offender is somewhere in the neighborhood. Of course, it continues to get larger, $30,000 to house an individual on an annual basis, depending on the circumstances. That's something that that we know that the legislature wants to look at. Certainly, DOC wants to make sure that that they have place to put folks and where they should be looking otherwise. But as you can see from this particular chart, the last couple of years, as devastating as COVID has been, it has been a godsend to prison population. That is, that's the sad commentary. And, it has, we have worked for years and years to try and find the magic bullet that would decrease prison population. And unfortunately, it took a pandemic to actually do it. And, we've chipped away at the sides and the edges a little bit, but this is, we're almost, as you can see, and really now, even as of the 14th, I think, we were down to 8,300 for our population. So you're almost looking almost 2,000 down from 2019. That gives DOC breathing room in their facilities. It gives their folks breathing room. But for the fact that they're having, as the Secretary told you, staffing shortages, but for that fact, things would be looking really good. But because they have shut 12 housing units, that has taken several of the beds offline, actually several thousand, or at least over 1,000 beds off. So we're actually technically looking in the capacity issue right now. Even though it looks like that we're way below capacity, the fact that they can't staff those areas presents it as a capacity issue, because they just don't have the bodies to be able to be on those particular units to have those folks. So I want you to look at that, yes, we can breathe a sigh of relief that we're down almost 2,000 beds, or 2,000 folks, but we have the tsunami backlog coming, and we have to figure out a way to get folks employed with DOC to be able to get back in there and open up those housing units. So hopefully that wasn't too much of a grayer lining to things. But, I think as the Secretary put it well yesterday about, what would we do if we were still at the same levels with the staffing levels that we are? So, that's something that, that obviously our office is concerned about, but obviously that's his bailiwick that he does. But it certainly is, from our standpoint, because our commission then makes recommendations to you, that should affect, hopefully, how you see things, not as that we have all this space left and we don't need to do any reform efforts. We actually are pretty much at capacity, and that depending on how well the Secretary does his job in hiring folks will dictate on how many more beds we can have. In the interim, what do we do? in being able to keep the most serious offenders incarcerated, because we know that there's a lot of bad people out there that need to be off the streets and away from society. What do we do with some of these other folks? And how do we do that so that they're not coming back in the revolving door? Some of the other things, again, I talked a little bit about admissions and releases. Those issues of if you have more releases than you do admissions, obviously your population is going to go down. It's kind of common sense. And that's what we've seen the last couple of years. Our direct new court commitments, those are nothing more than if I'm in court, the judge sentences me to Department of Corrections, I'm going, those are the numbers that, and they're also down, and we track those. Individuals receiving probation, we do have, again, usually about a third of those. We have 3/4 of them, 2/3 of them are successful. And that's thanks to the court service officers as well as the community corrections officers that operate in our state. We also always tend to focus on those 30 to 33% that are always the bad people and always getting violated of their probation and sent to prison. But it is nice to be able to see, 3/4, 2/3 of those folks are actually successful on probation and successfully complete. This gives you the numbers of those folks that aren't quite that lucky. And even those populations are going down. Some of that has to do, of course, with the fact that there are less people on probation. So you have less numbers for them to actually violate. However, we do have the numbers that are indicating that the violator population is getting less. The commission also monitors for those individuals then that go into prison. Then based upon what the crime is, they're either placed on parole or post-release supervision. If you have an off-grid crime, such as a murder or a certain child sex crimes, you're placed on parole by the Prisoner Review Board. If you have other crimes that are on the grid, those get post-release supervisions for a certain time period. This represents those folks that happen to be out and were actually then had some type of violation that sent them back into prison. Keep in mind, again, the vast majority of those folks paroled are not coming back, but these are the ones that are. And again, these are showing that we have decreases the last couple of years substantially. So after we look at those trends, we do some assumptions, and then this particular chart is what you get in terms of a 10-year projection from our office as to what things should look like. Normally, all of these numbers in the right-hand column to the far right, normally they're all positive. And in this case, almost all, but except one, which is the level 7s and 10s, are negative. And so this is obviously just a reflection of the decrease that we're seeing as far as our prison population is concerned. If the backlog is remedied within the next year or two, we do this on an annual basis, so you'll actually see a change occurring. But as it stands right now, that prison population change is at a negative 4.5%. So from the time from last year, we're looking at actually less inmates by the end of 2031. So that, again, good thing, and in some sense unprecedented, because normally, for those of you who are new, we don't see this very often. So how we handle that, I think, going forward is going to be very important. There are opportunities here for this committee, for Judiciary, House Judiciary as well, to look at how can we keep the capacity down. And this just gives you, the next couple charts just give you a list as far as visually what that actually looks like, where we have a capacity of 10,364. We're projecting for those numbers to stay down in the mid to low 8,000s for quite some time. And again, this is one of those things that we have not seen for years. We do break up the male and female population because the female population is less. Any changes that occur with them are larger percentage increases and decreases, but usually what you see with the male population is normally how the total population will go. But you know, you're in the range of 700 to 750 for female population. Like any good agency, one of the things we do is to track those projections that we've made and how well we do with that. I mentioned before that I'm very proud of the computer model that we actually do use. Normally in a statistical context, whether that be with criminal justice, whether it be in an election context, you know, you're looking at plus or minus 5% error rate on either side of your projections. I get my folks down to 2% or less because it's important. We're talking about millions of dollars at stake here. And so what you see here on the right is the percent error that we've had previously in terms of the entire prison population, and it's, you know, it's good. If we can stay below 2% on either side every single time, that gives DOC confidence in their numbers going far enough out to be able to do that. And I will say that, you know, we collaborate with them on a regular basis to make sure that, you know, things are not changing as far as sometimes there's policy changes that occur in the facilities and things like that that we need to know to make appropriate changes within the projections. But the model that we have, I have all the confidence in the world. There's, you know, obviously at the end of June here, we got a little crazy, but normally that is that's normally seen in the female population, as you can see here, just because of the, you know, we're only dealing with 700 or so in the population. Anytime that it gets off a little bit, then your percentages are going to be a little higher. How are we doing so far this fiscal year? The model is holding up very well. We're still around 2% on average as far as our error rate. The nice part about it again is we still see population going down. It is not going back up, and that was one of the issues with trying to forecast this was at what point is it going to turn around? Is it going to be 4 months in? Is it going to be 6 months in? So it makes it much more difficult than in just a regular year where we wouldn't have something that has been as catastrophic as the pandemic. So even during this time, this model has held up, and I attribute that not only to the model, but of course to the folks that are actually maintaining it and are involved with it. This just gives you an idea right now of that blue line is the projected population and what the actual is, and you know, I would very much rather be in this situation than under projecting. That is the substance of my comments. I'd be happy to stand for any questions, but I ask again to lean on us for data needs. We will be back, I'm sure, in that particular context with your bed space impacts. I also will I testify from time to time in terms of bills that the commission actually has asked me to bring over to you, and hopefully you'll be able to hear a few of those. So you'll be seeing me around quite a bit. But if you have any questions, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, Scott. You prove yet again the incredible work that you guys do with the numbers. I mean, and it comes to numbers and statistics as it relates to our prison population. It's remarkable. However, is it safe to assume that the decrease in prison population was because a lack of admissions but not early releases. I don't recall any specific early releases because of COVID, so it really is just a lack of new admissions. Is that fair to assume?
I think that would be, Mr. Chair, I think that would be fair to say. You have that backlog, but I don't know that, and that would be a question for DOC, but it's not my understanding that they did anything to increase the speed at which folks were actually getting out.
That was my understanding as well. Thank you for that. Now, again, your models, which have yet to be proven wrong, but it surprises me, I guess, that they continue a downward trend when it seems like our jails are so full of pretty violent criminals, according to Sedgwick County and other counties, that it doesn't see as that backlog starts to slow down or reduce, that we see the prison population increase. Any thoughts? I mean,
well, the model itself does not take into account whatever the jail population is. We are only looking at what the state prison population is, and the admissions to that. So if you have that backlog that is occurring, we will not see that until it actually occurs. So even if you have folks that are sentenced, and, well, I'll take that back. The folks that are sentenced will actually show up in there. But if it's a pre-sentence or pre-trial type of setting where they're just waiting for their trial, we're not going to see that until the admissions occur.
Gotcha. It'd be great to dump all that data at you with what's in our jails and see what your computer says, because I have a pretty strong hunch that we're going to see that number go the other direction in the next 2 or 3 years as we work on these backlogs. Representative Carmichael has had his hand up and looks forward to asking you a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope that you all can hear me clearly.
We can.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz, first I want to tell you that when I talk to my colleagues from other states, they are envious of the types of data that you can provide you and the commission and your staff provide this legislature. And when we look at the accuracy of that data, we're very lucky to have a sentencing commission in Kansas. That being said, Mr. Chairman, I have but 2 questions today.
Sure.
First, I noted that there is a vacancy on the commission. It appears to be an attorney member. Is it an opening to be filled by our governor or someone else? We want you to have full staff in these busy times.
Mr. Chair and Representative Carmichael, yes, we actually have a vacant private attorney position on the commission that has been open for some time, and there's a lot of factors that are figured into that, but the appointments office at the governor's office is who we get the information from. They are very good at allowing us to make recommendations and those type of things, but at the end of the day, it's their call as far as who goes on that. And this particular position, there are other positions certainly on the commission that are appointed by the Chief Justice, by legislative leadership. This particular position is a governor appointed position. And so, yes, we would be excited to have a private attorney, which we've had in the past.
That was my suspicion. Perhaps I can be of help in, I don't want to say building a fire on the 2nd floor. That might get me arrested, but at any rate, see if we can get some help there. My second question, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, of course, is as I'm drafting legislation before it's actually introduced, when it's at the reviser's draft type stage, can I get a look at that type of legislation, at least informally through your office, so that I can better not inadvertently fill the prison up with people who don't need to be there because I made something the wrong level of felony? Or for that matter, when I hear a bill in committee and discover that it has a significant bed impact, should I be talking to legislative research? Should I be talking to the reviser? Should I be talking to you so as to craft an amendment that would lessen the bed impact but still hopefully provide a deterrent to crime?
Mr. Chair, Representative Carmichael, I thought that Natalie already did that. She's a full service person, but No, I
Yes,
would,
see, but Scott, she's on our payroll, and we would rather have her available to do other things, like spend some time away from work with her family while you work.
I understand. I understand. Yes, I would encourage you to, and we have done that. In fact, we've done that even for the Attorney General, on the pre-filing status, if you are wanting to know what potential impact would be, or how many of certain crimes, or whatever your particular, the context of your bill would be, we would be available to do those special requests.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I can't figure out how to take my hand down, but I'm done.
Thank you, Representative. Members of the committee, any additional questions? Representative French?
Thank you, Scott, for being here today, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to address him. You list on your drug offenses on the chart 4 different types of drugs that are being identified. I've looked on the web, and there's at least 20 other illegal drugs. How are they incorporated into this chart?
This particular, the chart that you're looking at is below the drug offense grid. This was a table that was created mainly just to help practitioners for the main drugs that normally are sold or distributed. And so at the time that it was created, what you see there are meth, heroin, marijuana, cocaine. Those are the major crimes or the drugs types that we actually see. But you're absolutely correct. There are other things. I believe a mushroom bill is available right now that is circling around. That is part of that as far as, this is more for the most common types of drugs, their dosage units, those type of things for reference for practitioners.
I guess the thing I'm really asking, I know fentanyl is not on here, and I know it is the rising drug of concern, I think, within the nation. So is that under one of the opiates or something like that? Would that be considered the same?
Yeah, and that's something that as time goes on and we evolve, those type of things can actually be added as well. These are not, all of these things that are, all these forms that are done, these are all administered by the Sentencing Commission, and we have the ability to actually change those on approval of the Commission. So those type of things, certainly, once they become more prevalent, as you're saying with fentanyl, it certainly can be added.
And Mr. Chairman, one more question, if I could. You listed the crimes in the 4 big metropolitan areas. Is there a way that we can get our own county's crime stats? Can we ask you to provide those for?
Well, absolutely, and I would be, and I appreciate the softball question. We do have on our website, if you go to sentencing.ks.gov, we do have dashboards that you can actually specifically go to drug crimes, and you can pick your county, and it will actually show you a myriad of information about your particular jurisdiction. And we did that specifically, again, with all the data that we have. We want to be able to, visualization is a big deal and has been a big deal for quite some time. Bring all that data together and then be able to put it in a form that you and I can actually go to do a few clicks on the computer and be able to pull up Leavenworth County, pull up Atchison County, and be able to see what felony crimes are actually being committed. And so we have, I think, no less than 6 different dashboards that you can actually look for your own county and then look how it compares to statewide. Sometimes a lot of administrators in different counties will actually look at that for budgeting purposes to see what's the crime looking like around in the neighboring jurisdictions as well. So that would be I would encourage you to go to the website and pull those dashboards.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, thank you. Questions? Representative Heiberger, did I see that Mr. Whiskers has some questions? That's all right. His cat keeps showing up across the screen as he's watching. You guys don't get the entertainment, I get the entertainment. So, yeah, Mr. Whiskers keeps coming by to say hello. All right, Scott. Well, thank you very much for preparing this, for your time. I know we'll see much more of you, and thank you for your willingness to provide information to us collectively and individually.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. Body, is there any other business to be brought before the committee today? All right, seeing none, we will be adjourned.